on a precarious stand or something, so there's a lot of shaking going on when you talk or hit your keyboard or something.
Okay, thanks. Thanks. Great, we're live, and this is the first Climate Tracker Path to Paris webinar. Thanks to all of you around the world who are joining us. My name is Josh Weezy. I am a project director at the Global Call for Climate Action, and I'm joined today by four wonderful guests. Antonio Hill, who is the executive director of the Global Call for Climate Action. We have Chris Wright, who is the program manager for our Climate Tracker and Adopt a Negotiator program. And we have some veteran climate trackers who are activist stars in their own right. Dialing in from Spain, we have Anna. I don't want to give all of Anna's last name, so which one should we go with?
Perez, Ana Perez.
Ana Perez. Okay. And we have Lehi. And Lehi is dialing in from the east coast of the U.S. Or are you up in Canada?
East Coast, New Hampshire, right now.
Lehi. Okay. Well, fantastic. So thanks for joining us, everyone. This is the first of quite a few webinars, online conversations that we're going to have, trainings for the Global Call for Climate Action's Climate Tracker program over the coming months between now and these big negotiations happening in Paris. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but first I just want to lay out real clearly what the Climate Tracker program is and what the Adopt a Negotiator program is. They're both parts of the Global Call for Climate Action, so big network of partners, over 450 partners around the world, all working on responding to climate change. And much of our work together is in international politics, trying to get a new global agreement and improve the global agreements that exist to get the right policies in place so that we can respond to this huge challenge. So the Climate Tracker program is a tool to help activists and writers, communicators around the world, especially young people, get their voices, hopes, and passions out there in a way that engages public and puts pressure on leaders. So over the course of the coming months, we'll have a series of trainings and a series of collaborated actions, global calls for climate action, where we're going to engage the media. Hopefully, we're going to spur one of the biggest climate change writing movements the world has yet seen, all pushing for climate action. As part of that, we also offer a few fellowships to bring a small team of trackers to these negotiations to follow their countries. And so they are Adopt a Negotiator fellows, and we have at least 10 spots for Paris for funded fellowships. And we're going to pick from the climate trackers who participate over the coming months, those who really excel in building pressure on their government, engaging large groups of people on these issues. We're going to pick at least 10 of you to bring to Paris on a team with us. So first, I think I'd like to just bring this conversation around to why now. Let's see. Antonio, can you hear us?
Yep. You froze out for a second, Josh. Sorry.
Sorry about that. So what's happening this year? Tell us about 2015, why it's a big deal.
Sure. Yep. I want to talk about three different things that mean this is a really big year, 2015. The first one has to do with the global shift from fossil fuels to clean energy. I think, you know, when we look back in history, we're going to look right around this time at the point when renewables really took off and the world really started to shift. This is, of course, I think one of the big potential wins from the Paris conference at the end of this year and something we're leading up to. But I just want to highlight a couple pieces that that make this story real. The first has to do with what's called grid parity, which is where renewable power sources start to match or indeed undercut the average price of electricity that is available on the grid. I mean, over a year ago, there were 19 markets globally that had already reached grid parity. Those are specific either residential or industrial markets in different countries. In places like Dubai, today, a long-term power purchase contract is now in the works. It was recently signed for just 5 cents a kilowatt hour. That's less than half of what average electricity costs in the United States, for example. But even in places like Germany, where large solar power plants are delivering around 9 cents, you know, years, I think, we're really good to see them in a majority of the world, but it's already well underway. A second piece to this story has to do with energy storage solutions on the technology side. Basically, this is going to allow us to start using energy when it's cheap and drain it when it's pricey. And these, of course, you know, we all use these things in our cell phones. Increasingly, people have traveled in electric vehicles that are using that. I think, you know, that we're really going to see a transformation in that area in the next couple of years. But what's really interesting is this is now going to both household and indeed kind of grid-wide solutions. So just 5 days ago, Tesla announced a new home and business battery. It's called a power wall that you can put on your wall. And what this allows consumers to do is basically arbitrage between the highest price points when electricity is most expensive. And so people who are generating solar and maybe aren't in a place necessarily where they can count on it full time, they can begin to use the battery to offset that instead of drawing from the grid, or indeed sell back to the grid when energy is most expensive and get the best deal. So the battery storage solution is another really exciting piece for this, and that is indeed getting to the point now where they're going to be able to start, where they are already looking at replacing what are known as peaker plants, which is natural gas-powered power plants to deal with peak demand in places like the States. And these are very, very expensive because they're developed and constructed and set up just to address those peaks. So they're only in operation for a few weeks or months out of the year, and the rest of the time they sit idle. And of course, the capital costs and the construction costs are quite expensive. But what's now soon to be an option is for power companies, instead of putting these peaker plants in, to have like storage solutions, and these can be things like compressed air storage or flow batteries, for which the technology is getting better and better. So again, all of these things are helping drive things in the right direction. They are an important part of why coal is effectively dead. I mean, coal prices in the United States have reached a 60-year low and are likely to fall further this year. And the same thing is happening in Australia. In Europe, coal could drop as much as 25%. So coal is under pressure from renewables as well, but it's also under regulatory pressure in the United States and China, of course, where significantly governments are moving to shut down older, dirtier power plants for climate change reasons. So all of these reasons, I think, are also being driven, or all these events are being driven in part by the fact that the social license for fossils is being retired. Slowly but surely, we're seeing people actually take interest in and object to the use of fossil fuels as part of the energy mix, basically saying that profiting off climate change is morally wrong. And that's what's happening today. In fact, if you look at the hashtag Divest Norway, there's a big move to get the world's largest sovereign wealth fund to divest from fossil fuels. And just a few days ago, the Church of England, which has a £9 billion fund, divested 12 million of those pounds, about $15 million, from tar sands oil and thermal coal. So that connects to the second big thing that's going on this year, which is that people power is under pressure. I think last year was a really important year with the People's Climate March in New York and many other places contributing to the idea that actually people can not only set the agenda and influence the agenda, but we can pick our battles. We can decide when to do that. We don't need to necessarily wait around for big government meetings or particular events to show, in fact, what the people want. And I think the success of the People's Climate March last year means that, in fact, that this year we've got to demonstrate it wasn't a fluke, and that's a big challenge. A big part of that is going to be reaching out to those millions of people who came out to march or to take action or to talk about climate change for the first time, and give them cover to do more. Give them the arguments and the evidence to show them they're on the winning side. And I think that's something that the Adopt a Negotiator and the Climate Tracker Initiative are set to do. So the third thing now comes to do with governments, which of course are still important, and they are gearing up to a major international agreement at the end of the year in Paris. It's likely to be the biggest kind of forcing moment we have in terms of the intergovernmental regulation of climate-related activities for the next 5 years at least. And as part of that, and probably the most significant piece, is the targets that countries are all committed to putting on the table in advance of Paris. For the first time in history, we have a commitment from all governments to actually say what they're prepared to commit to in terms of climate action. These are known as the intended nationally determined contributions, which is kind of the insider technical term. And I think together, those three things, these national commitments that are going to be out on the table, the fact that people power is set to make another big difference in the run-up to and at Paris, and the fact that we're in the midst of this big fossil fuel transition make this year a really profound moment for the climate movement and also for humanity. So history's in the making, and I think the Climate Tracker program can play a really important part.
Thanks, Antonio. Yeah, so for those of you who are just joining us, this is our Path to Paris Climate Tracker webinar, the first one we're doing this year, and you'll see below my name, it's reversed for me, hopefully it looks the right way for you, hashtag Climate Tracker. So if you are on Twitter and you'd like to join this conversation, we're going to do a question and answer period at the end. You can send your comments and questions on Twitter using the hashtag Climate Tracker, and so we'll pull your views into this perspective, and then in the future we'll have a lot more sort of proper discussions. So apologies if this feels a bit more like a broadcast, but please do join us in that way. So Antonio, you're telling us that we're in the midst of this massive shift that in terms of the real economy. There's pressure on old energy systems. There's new tools, technological tools that are helping make clean energy much more accessible. These governments are setting the course for the future, and even though that there's kind of the writing on the wall that we should be moving towards clean energy, we do hear a lot about new coal in Australia, for example, or Shell lobbying the EU and watering down their INDC, their climate action plan, and we still have this huge job to do. So I wonder, from your perspective as somebody who's been in the movement for a long time, we have a lot of people on watching who are going to join us in this adventure. What kind of role can they play? How does writing and activism sort of come together in this moment to bring all this together and help keep that pressure on?
Sure. I guess the biggest shift, all of the developments that I just mentioned, I think I'm not taking these from kind of insider NGO activist sources and people's wish lists. I mean, these are coming from mainstream news, with sources like Deutsche Bank, big investment banks, 24/7 Wall Street that are talking about these dynamics. And I think that's what's really important about now, is that we're really poised to go mainstream. I mean, this stuff isn't, 5 years ago, the whole climate story was a bit of an insider game. It was a bunch of freaks on the outskirts that had a long wish list about how to make the world a better place, including Josh Weezy. And now I think we can truly say actually the tectonic plates are shifting. And I think the biggest part of that, I mean, my own personal view is that the technology is important. The business investment cycles and drivers are important. But at the end of the day, what's most important, in fact, is everyday people. It's citizens around the world who understand why and how this affects them, who decide that they want to make a mark, do something about it, tell people about it, get involved, participate. And I think helping to reach them and helping give them, as I said, the cover to do so, the arguments, the stories that help them share this story are absolutely critical. And I think that's where climate trackers can play a really critical role. We saw last year how the kind of scale of coverage and stories that was generated out of the Climate Tracker program really did help make a mark. It helped, convey the sense, actually, this is a mainstream issue. This is something that everybody's talking about. This is something that people need to get engaged with. So, I mean, just take the national targets as an example. I mean, this is an obscure kind of UNFCCC acronym, yet another on a very long list, the so-called INDCs. Obviously, I don't think we're going to get very far in trying to lose out on mainstream news channels or tell people about it just on the basis of the UN process or that acronym alone. And indeed, a lot of attention is going to focus on whether or not they're enough, whether they're ambitious enough, how they compare internationally, and so on and so forth. And I think potentially the untold story is going to be the story about what's possible and the benefits in action. And this is really kind of an opening for a conversation, a societal conversation that really needs to happen in local languages in lots of different countries around the world, where people are actually relating the quality of life, well-being, benefits, things that they value in the context of their own country's development, and indeed things that affect them directly, and how their country's national target is going to affect that for better or for worse over the coming period. And so the opportunities for countries and for communities, the opportunities that are out there to be seized by taking part in climate action is, I think, the story that climate trackers can tell. And so basically by raising awareness, by kicking off and stimulating debates, and shaping those conversations that are going to be had in lots of different places in mainstream media, but also in other kinds of media. All that is going to raise pressure on decision makers, but importantly, going to help people, everyday people, engage, relate this to their own realities, and hopefully take climate action themselves as well.
Thanks, Antonio. So I want to get into what that actually means to the people on this call who we're asking to take part, and get the perspectives of some of our recent trackers. But maybe just really quickly, you could tell us about May and what, if we're going to sort of set out our first collaborative action in May, we're going to get together, we're going to push pieces out there as a climate tracker team of people around the world. Why May? Why might that be an important time to start?
Sure. Basically, I think May is a critical period. It's a key month within which we're hearing more and more about a bunch of developments that are going to happen between the kind of May and June period. So I think there's a whole series of to latch on to and to start to track that climate trackers can grab onto and engage with and begin to talk about. And there's a lot to choose from. So of course there's a kind of growing awareness of the national targets and that process of developing and announcing and then negotiating these so-called INDCs. And we're starting to get to critical mass where basically we already know what those are or what they're going to look like for the US, for China, for Mexico, for a whole series of countries around the world. There are some big ones still to be announced, but already I think we can help set the scene and begin to help people understand why they're important, again, not just internationally, but domestically as well. In places like the UK, there's a big election coming up just in a few days' time, and of course that's significant because of the joint climate pledge that all of the main party leaders signed on to there, which isn't necessarily anything hugely new in the context of that country, but I think internationally it's significant. And so, and I think we haven't seen quite as much attention in that election process to date, partly because of that pledge. But I think once the election happens, then attention will come back to those pledges, and I think that's an opportunity to start again looking at how countries are positioning themselves in the run-up to Paris. There are a series of mobilizations set for the weekend, the last weekend in May, the 30th and 31st. And we're looking ahead to meetings like the G7, so the world's 7 biggest economies are getting together the 7th and 8th of June in Germany. And there are climate-related pieces on the agenda there. We expect that's going to be an important pressure point, not just for Merkel in Germany, but also for countries like Japan, who have recently announced their INDC, and we know they're really on a weak foot, and there's potential to help really raise ambition in Japan, kind of using the German model almost as an example, and leveraging from this G7 summit as an important moment to do so. There's big announcements or launches going to be happening. We're expecting, of course, the papal encyclical, which is going to be big news in the June-July period. Equally, there's the Lancet Commission, which is a very important medical journal out of the UK. It's going to be launching a big report focusing on the health impacts of climate change. And then, of course, we have the intercessional talks in the first 2 weeks of June happening in Bonn, which isn't going to be a big kind of mainstream news story, but things are going to be chugging along. There's something to grab onto, and we'll start to begin to see the shape in a lot more detail of the Paris Agreement and what that's likely to look like. And then there's going to be big kind of popular cultural events happening in June as well, like the concert that's scheduled for midway through the month. So there's a whole slew of things that are really going to kind of hit the headlines, hit the news, hit people's consciousness in the next couple of months. And so therefore I think May is absolutely the right time to start anticipating some of this, finding out more, and helping set the scene so that a lot more people can really make sense of all this and understand why it matters.
Thanks. That was a massive information dump. Really appreciate it, Antonio. Antonio is joining us from Bogota, Colombia. He is the executive director of the Global Call for Climate Action, and before that, a policy lead at Oxfam. He's even played the role of negotiator on the inside in the past. So he's got a lot of little bits and pieces to track and a lot of experience to put that in context. Of course, most of the people around the world don't have awareness of any of this, and so there's a huge opportunity for us in May to start that conversation with them. Maybe there are people that we can reach who are sort of health focused, and the story, the report in the Lancet that's coming out in this health journal might resonate with them, or maybe there are people of faith that we could reach through some newspapers or other communications channels, and we have this big thing coming from the Pope, and of course all of this comes together with one news hook of many with these next round of negotiations in June in Bonn. And so if we can come together and each get one story out there, published in a newspaper, in blogs, maybe an interview on the radio, we're going to help build these bridges to these news events that are happening that are super relevant, help build pressure on decision makers who are ultimately sort of setting out this longer term vision that's going to be kind of captured in these climate action plans and these treaties. I'm going to pivot over to Chris Wright. Chris is the project manager. He's the main point of contact for those of you on the call who are climate trackers and writing in and trying to get ideas for how to pitch. Chris leads a lot of our webinars and will this year. And Lehi Yona and Anna over here. We've got. Let's talk about the climate tracker experience. Chris, maybe you could lead this next bit of the conversation, help people understand what this is like as a participant and how it goes. Oh, Chris, go right ahead.
Sure thing. And yeah, sure thing. And can I say to everyone watching, it is so great to meet you. I guess somewhat in a strange relationship here, where I'm the only one talking, and and you guys are just watching on, but it is wonderful to meet you all, and I really look forward to meeting you one-on-one on Twitter, on our blogs, on emails, and everything, and I really look forward to getting to know you all as close as possible, as close as the internet will facilitate our meeting. But I wanted to introduce all of you to some people who went through it all last year, and these two lovely young women, Lihi Yona and Ana Catala Perez, who are both kind of amazing, strong, independent, and kind of wonderful trackers in very, very different ways. I wanted to try and introduce them to you all, to give you an idea of what you can kind of come to expect in the Climate Tracker program, but also some of the transformations that they undertook last year and potentially you can undertake as well. So I want to start with introducing Ana. Ana Catala Perez is joining us from Catalonia, the soon-to-be, I guess, hopeful independent state of former Spain, and I want you all to know that Ana joined us last year in the Climate Tracker program, and she was one of our more experienced bloggers. So I was going to kind of open things up as with Ana, and then kind of refer back to Lihi. So Ana, you came to the Adopt a Negotiator project with a fair bit of experience writing, didn't you?
Well, I guess no one is an expert and no one has experience when it comes to writing, but yeah, I studied, well, I have a master in climate change, and I always like communicating these kind of issues, so environment and climate related to politics or to social aspects maybe. So I had created some blogs with friends in the university or during my masters, or joined local organizations trying to raise awareness. So if that's experience, then it's okay. Yeah, I have experience.
And I have to say, when I first met Ana, I was definitely impressed. You definitely don't need a master's degree. You definitely don't need to have started your own kind of blogging group to join the Adopt a Negotiator project. And Lihi's definitely going to be able to talk to that a little bit more. But kind of, Ana, when you did join the Adopt a Negotiator Climate Tracker project last year, did you find that you had to kind of further yourself? Did you have to push yourself even further in some of the ways that you previously tried to write?
Of course. I pushed myself physically and mentally, actually. Well, before going to the COP and before to join the program, I had to pitch new newspapers, make new contacts, learn how to write in a less maybe scientific way, because you're trying to reach like the whole public. I don't know, focus on something concrete, maybe mitigation, maybe adaptation. Just choose one topic, or if not, you're just writing about everything. And then when I was there, you need to understand what's going on, because the COP, it's really complicated, and you are going around trying to find your way. So then it was really nice to learn how to work alone, but also teamwork, and rely on my fellow trackers and these kind of things. So it really helped me and really give me a lot of new tools to participate in Adopt a Negotiator, and it was, yeah, far more difficult than just starting my own blog.
All right, and I don't want kind of that message to go out to make anyone scared or anyone kind of fearful that they don't want to go through the sweat and tears. Ana, was it all worth it for you?
Of course, it was awesome. I mean, I learned more than in my whole master's degree or something, and I made great friends. So that's amazing.
Well, that's great to know. And I guess, Ana, before I switch over to Lihi, would you be able to offer us kind of one piece of advice, especially for those writers who are going to join our program, who might have a little bit more experience?
In terms of pitching, for example, I learned that I have to be more direct, because normally I'm too kind, like, I would like to do whatever, blah, 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 and then you get nothing. So it's very important to say, hey, I am super cool, and I want to write here, whatever newspaper it is or whatever blog. That really, it's something I would change, and I would try to do better in next publications I want to do or whatever. And then, of course, learn how to make it simple, how to connect with local stories, things that people will understand at your home and with language you are writing. That would be some advice that I would say.
All right, and for everyone who might be a little bit confused what the idea of a pitch is, or what Anna means in terms of making things simple, a pitch is when you kind of send an email out, or you call an editor or a publisher of a newspaper or a blog even, and you kind of sell them your idea. You tell them exactly what you want to write, why you want to write it, and kind of how you're going to do it. And that's something that we've covered a lot in the past in terms of trainings, and we even have some webinars on it as well. And there's a blog called 9 Tips in 90 Seconds that you can all track down on the Adopt a Negotiator website for more understandings on how to pitch, and a little bit of a kind of a simplified version of what you might want to do when you are emailing editors, which might come into our first task in May. I might transition over to Lihi now. Now, Lihi joins us not from Europe, but from Canada. So we've got, you know, an Australian talking to a Canadian right now. We're literally crossing the entire span of the globe. And Lihi was a wonderful kind of climate tracker who joined us with a very different experience to Anna, and much less experience in terms of a writer. So Lihi, did you have very much experience last year when you kind of joined the Climate Tracker program?
So I didn't. I had a lot of experience with the UN. I had been to 3 COP conferences at that point, and I had been organizing a lot. So I had a lot of it. I worked on the People's Climate March. So I had a lot of organizing experience. But when it came to writing, I had written a few pieces in the years previous. I was kind of at this place where the Montreal newspaper that I used to publish with wasn't really responding, and what I found myself is I just wrote. I didn't know how to pitch, so I would just write entire op-eds and send them off in the hopes that they would get published. And so I definitely would say, in terms of my skills with the organizing and my knowledge of COP, my writing was definitely one of those weaker skills.
So Lihi's obviously representing kind of something that possibly a lot of you watching on representing, someone that's had a lot of NGO experience and is kind of potentially really interested in climate change, particularly from her local experience where she's kind of worked as a community organizer for a while, but doesn't necessarily have so much writing experience. But Lihi, something changed last year, and you suddenly had a bit of a breakthrough, didn't you?
Yeah, so this is actually, it's funny that you mentioned pitches, because that was probably the single thing that really made a big difference. It was the first year that I was with the Climate Tracker program. I was with another youth-based NGO that's in the U.S., Sustain Us, and I really wanted, as a Canadian who's studying in the U.S., I wanted to do more work with Canada. I saw the way that the previous year at the climate change negotiations in Warsaw, the Canadian negotiators didn't even care about what they were doing, because no one was really holding them accountable to what they were saying. So through the help of a fellow tracker, Diego, who is from Costa Rica, he helped me draft a pitch to this same Montreal newspaper that I kept struggling with, and they responded and they said yes. And so I published a piece during the first week of the negotiations that oddly enough got shared 2,000 times, which I was not expecting. And I co-wrote a piece with Anna that was in RTCC responding to climate change, and Diego helped me just, you know, all of the trackers, which is what is so great, is that a lot of the fellows have this experience, and so they do have connections with other news services. And so I ended up pitching a piece that Diego and I co-wrote about the fossil fuel divestment campaigns and how that connects to the climate negotiations, and that also got shared 1,000 times. And then I wrote another piece about how the irony of the U.S. and Canada talking about climate action when in reality they're talking about tar sands and shale gas development back home, and that also got shared. And so I think by learning how to write a pitch, I basically just got a lot of responses from, you know, I wrote something like 20 different articles for 12 different news outlets. They were, you know, news wires, they were more journalism pieces, which were the first time I'd ever written anything like that, but a lot of op-eds that got published in a bunch of places. So it was definitely exciting because I think also being encouraged to write, I was very scared to pitch because I assumed that no one would want to hear from me. And it was like what Anna had said, giving a reason for publishers to look at you and editors to look at you, and being at these negotiations, being a climate tracker is something that definitely gives you a lot of credibility.
So I think that's a really great story for everyone watching on, in that while Leahy has got a fair bit of environmental experience, it was definitely her ability to try and reach out, to ask for help, and to kind of develop her own ability to reach out to journalists and reach out to editors in particular, which really created that transition where she was able to kind of reach that steamroll level where you kind of heard her going on about all the different shares and all the different articles that she wrote. And it was a really amazing time to be around Leahy at that point, because she was absolutely buzzing and kind of bouncing off the walls. But I wanted to share those stories because I want to let everyone know that that's possible for everyone. We've also had other trackers who've joined our team. You'll see Anna is nodding her head right now. We've had other trackers who joined our team who've previously never had anything published, joined the Climate Tracker program without ever publishing an article before, without any kind of previous UN experience, and kind of perhaps very little NGO experience. And those are some of the people who, if they put in the work, I believe have just as much chance as anyone else to create a massive impact in not only their local, potentially their national, and maybe even their international kind of media communities. And if you are watching on and you're feeling that you might not have the experience, or you might not be kind of as kind of ready for this as maybe Anna was, or maybe Leahy was, I want to let you know that both of these climate trackers, if you like, improved in leaps and bounds from where they started from, and kind of that journey is what we're really looking for. And we really hope that throughout our Climate Tracker program this year, we'll be able to give you the support and the opportunities that will make you into the best possible climate writer that you could be, and perhaps that will be someone who will then also join our team in Paris. Now, just before I leave you, Leahy, I asked Anna for some advice for those people who are more experienced, but obviously you were much less experienced. So what advice would you offer to those people who are not experienced writers and are hoping to stand up during this Climate Tracker program?
Definitely. I would say pitch. Learn how to pitch, and there are resources where we can help you learn how to do this, but just reach out. You never know who is going to respond to what you want to write, and I think for me the biggest thing was just getting over that hesitation. So just go for it and write and think through ideas that are innovative, that look, talking about the Lancet piece, looking at ways to frame climate change that maybe aren't the sort of standard polar bear story. How are we going to frame this conversation over the next few months leading up to Paris in a way that kind of facilitates climate action? So don't be nervous about reaching out to different editors, and feel free to reach out to people so that maybe they might be able to connect you as well. When I was going through the first wave of the Climate Tracker program, they encouraged us to publish in places where we hadn't published before, and that made me kind of push myself beyond what was comfortable. So try to look at places that are beyond just your blogs or places that you have published before, but think about places that you could pitch to that might be able, if they accept you, have a big impact.
Thank you, Leahy. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Chris. So you guys have had a chance to hear about this year and this crazy shift that we're undergoing. You heard a little bit about the kind of impact that people can have, and the need for people to understand these issues as we're going through these massive changes in our energy systems, facing literally new climates. And you heard about some personal experiences with Leahy and Anna and Chris talking through their journey last year. In Anna's case, having been an activist and an academic who's always written, but had to learn how to really sell herself as an expert, even though she had some expertise, and get her voice out there. And she had some great success in Spain, engaging people across the country on these issues over time. It took some time to build those relationships with editors, etc., and some really powerful stuff. Leahy, similarly, wealth of experience as an activist, also a student, and a great writer, but hadn't put this out into the public, and was starting, maybe not quite getting there with pitches, and learned that she could improve both how she did it, but also I think just had to do it a lot more, and just keep pitching, and finally started to get some traction. I think I remember at one point, Leahy, you got that Montreal story published, and then lo and behold, maybe one of the rare upsides of media companies like merging into another was your same op-ed was published in pretty much every major city across Canada. It really resonated with people, and you were able to really start a conversation about climate change that Canadians should be having anyway, but just weren't because it wasn't getting picked up. So huge opportunity. So I just want to lay out really quickly and then go into questions and answers. If you already have questions, and as some of you have already been doing this, please hop onto Twitter and tweet to us with the hashtag climate tracker in your question. Chris is taking a look now, and he'll be able to bring those questions and comments into the conversation. Antonio is also still with us. I know you can't see his face there, but you can let us know if your question goes to him or to Leahy or Anna, myself, or Chris. But I just want to give a brief overview of the year ahead, starting with May and then ending with Paris. We want you guys to join us in trying to push one piece out in May. Last year, around the global climate mobilization in March, we asked our climate trackers to do that one piece, and there were hundreds of pieces that got published around the world, many in big papers, but a lot of them in blogs. It was a really powerful experience. Like, the richness and depth of the conversations that were taking place through the media because of these efforts was incredible. So we'd like to try and do that this May. We're going to send additional details following up on some of the hooks and angles that Antonio mentioned, some of the resources that might be useful that Leahy and Chris mentioned, and some of the ideas that Anna had shared. But we want you to start and try and get one piece out in May. We're going to offer trainings throughout the year to try and sharpen your skills. A lot of you are coming from different places. Some have those journalist skills already, but could use some briefings from experts on the front lines. Others have the experience as an activist, but could use some of those journalist skills. So we'll be doing that this month, next month, from Bonn, all the way up to Paris. In July, we'll do another global call for climate action. So one big story in May to get the ball rolling. In July, we'll do it again, and you guys will be able to build on the lessons learned from May. So some of you will have had great success in May and maybe keep writing. Others might have some frustrations, and so you'll be able to take that lesson, maybe check out some of the webinars, maybe reach out to Chris and I or other climate trackers to learn, like, okay, it didn't work, what do I do next? And in July, you'll have a chance to grow. And then we'll do it again in September. So a big global call during this UN General Assembly in September, which is a big moment where world leaders come together, an opportunity for us to raise again the profile of climate issues. There's also a lot of important sustainable development conversations happening, so lots of opportunities there. And based on your journey from May to September, in September, we're going to offer at least 10 people funded fellowships to Paris. So if you do this and you don't get a fellowship, there's still a really good chance that you're going to start an important conversation in the media in your country, that you're going to help put pressure on leaders. So there's a ton of value in just taking part of this program. I know there are people on this call who are in their 50s or in their 60s, and they know that adopt a negotiator isn't their thing, but they want to be a part of this global climate change writing movement. They want to use their experience and their words and their ideas and passion to push that out there through the media. So we're going to help them do it. And then some of you are really interested in going to Paris, and so you want to join our team, you want a funded fellowship, there's an opportunity for some of you to do that based on your experience, starting with this May Global Call for Climate Action, doing it again in July, doing it again in September. We're going to offer at least 10 funded fellowships to join our team in Paris. And we'll work on opportunities, more opportunities to try and offer you guys to support you in your activism and your work over the course of this year. But one thing that we can put on the table now is 10 funded Adopt a Negotiator fellowships for Paris. So hopefully that kind of gives you the gist. We're going to follow this, this conversation with an email where we lay it out more explicitly. This call is recorded, so you can watch it again and go back if we were talking too fast or you didn't understand my accent or something. But for now, we're going to kick it over to some questions. So, Chris, maybe you could hop back on and throw out the first question. See if we can get him. I might have caught him off guard since he was deep in Twitter land here.
It's all right. I'm back. I've escaped the Wonderland rabbit hole of Twitter. Though I'm usually existent in that Wonderland rabbit hole anyway. But no, I'm back, and I've been receiving a lot of great questions. So thank you everyone for getting involved online. If you've got more questions after the kind of the webinar is over, we'd be happy to answer it for hours and days to come. So feel free to use this climate tracker hashtag for a long time to come. But I think we've already got some great questions that I might want to touch on for kind of framing this climate tracker program and trying to answer some of the kind of basic questions of where we want to head as kind of a program, and maybe some basic questions people also have. So we have a great question from Pearl asking, when we blog, do we blog for a newspaper, for example, or create our own blog sites through Blogger? So one of the things that we found was really, really effective last year is that we kind of asked people to try and reach out to a platform, a media platform that they hadn't previously reached out to, necessarily didn't own themselves. So while I think some of you probably have cultivated an amazing blog audience, and I definitely want you to try and utilize that blog audience if that's what you have done, one of the things that we'd love to try and do is encourage people to reach out and to try and pitch to even larger audiences. And for me, it's all about kind of people showing how much they're willing to kind of put into this and how much they're trying to extend themselves. Now, you heard from both Leahy and Anna that both of them had kind of previously had some writing experience. Obviously, Anna had kind of set up her own blog, and Leahy had kind of in the past maybe written 1 or 2 articles or so. But both of them, through this Climate Tracker program, really took it upon themselves to try and reach out to new mediums, whether they be other people's blogs at first, then maybe they were kind of climate-related websites, maybe then they were reaching out to environment websites, and maybe finally they tried to build up to reaching out to kind of big mainstream media, because often it's hard to make like a jump straight into it. But over time, both of them made this kind of transition and were kind of over time able to develop their ability to reach a broader and broader audience. So definitely I would really encourage you to continue writing on your blog, continue bringing up climate change, renewable energy, fossil fuel divestment, all the things that we're talking about, to keep talking about them on your blogs, but also make this an opportunity where you can try and reach out, and you can try and reach out to new audiences through new media platforms. And that's something that I would love to be there to support you to do. We've got obviously some blogs online that can help you. I've got also a toolkit that I kind of will be sending around to all of you very soon on a very clear way to kind of pitch to people. And I would really love to be able to support all of you trying to reach out to new audiences and new media platforms.
Thanks, Chris. Let's see if we can get Antonio back in here. Antonio, are you with us? There you are. Great. Antonio, we have a question from Rafi in the Philippines. Since you're in Bogota and have done a lot more traveling and working in developing countries. This might be a good one for you. How can journalists from developing countries like the Philippines make people appreciate the concept of clean energy? So maybe that's not their first priority. How do we bring that to life and help people connect with it?
Sure. Can you see me all right?
Yes.
My screen's not showing something. Okay. I think the key is really to change up the language sometimes, because I think for many people in every context, it's not necessarily about climate change or clean energy per se, but it is about transport solutions. It's about local air pollution. It's about climate impacts, for example, all of which can be related back to clean energy or climate-related issues. And so if you use those entry points, I think there's often much more receptivity and interest because of the relevance. So here in Colombia, for example, it's not, I mean, climate change isn't really something that is part of the day-to-day reality yet. I mean, when it appears in the newspaper, still people talk about, you know, far-off negotiations somewhere else in the world, or indeed climate impact somewhere else in the world. But if you talk about local transport, then you've hit a hot-button issue that is one of the key. It's indeed one of the big voting issues here in Bogota for local elections, for example. Something that people talk about on a daily basis and care deeply about. So I think it's as simple as that, and there are lots of great examples of how people have done so. I mean, the one that occurs to me at the moment, of course, is all the attention drawn to the air pollution problem in Beijing as a result of that. Kind of documentary video that was published on YouTube and went viral. So that you know, kind of an approach really helps to bring attention and draw people in.
Thanks. So maybe, given we're moving into this really busy period, I'll pivot over to Anna and Leahy. You guys had to use more local issues, or in some cases try and insert these international issues like the negotiations into local audiences, and in Spain and Canada and the U.S. Can you talk about you know, how do you make these issues that people do feel like Antonio mentioned, that they don't feel directly connected to necessarily? It's maybe in the far off present, or it's so abstract it's in negotiations and not in their real lives day to day. How did you find you were able to connect to an audience who isn't climate focused? Do you have any advice?
Yeah, I can go first. So I was lucky because I played off of how much people currently dislike the Canadian Prime Minister. So it was easy to tie into that way. I think when I was writing, my biggest struggle was, how do you not write another article about how Canada is doing nothing at the UN climate change negotiations? That's pretty typical. We know this. You know, it's more cathartic than anything else. And so I tried to figure out how to tie INDCs into this, trying to get Canada to publicly mention its INDC submission that it said it was going to submit, but didn't really seem like it was going to do. So I wrote my op-ed on you know, the values that Canadians stand for, the idea that we see ourselves as like this country that is sort of great and humble and polite and cares about people and is compassionate. You know, we're sending troops to Nepal after the earthquake and all these things. But that image that we have of ourselves is not connected to these negotiations. So that is how I spoke about these values that we have as Canadians, and then connecting that to the climate change negotiations, but also giving people something to do. So telling them to call their elected officials and talk to them about INDCs. The other thing that I did is, I tried to connect the fossil fuel divestment campaigns. I'm a student at a university in the U.S. where I'm leading the campaign, and I think that was also tricky because people who think about these negotiations don't think about how it connects to their communities. And so in a lot of places, honestly, in Canada, the US as well, but also in India and a lot of other countries around the world, there are these campaigns that are trying to look at fossil fuel industry. And so connecting it to some kind of local issue that is in the news, divestment was in the news, you know, the sort of distrust of Stephen Harper was in the news, trying to figure out what it is specifically that people in your community care about and what is being reported is really important, and also increases the chances that what you write will get published because it's relevant to some news story.
That's great. Great. And Anna, did you have anything to add, or you could also bring in? And we have a question from Divya Sharma asking if we can keep our language critical and sharp. I know that you're a fiery young woman. You have strong opinions, and yet also you end up interacting publicly, like physically with negotiators. You see them in the hallways, or you work with people in government in Catalonia. So where do you bring all that together? How do you pull in connecting with an audience and being true to your values and your voice, and showing your frustration and being tactical and polite, stuff like that? Or how does this I'm asking a terrible question, but pull me out of a hole here and just reflect on your experience a little bit.
Okay, I think I was hearing you a bit cut, but I think I understood that you're asking how you could do both things. So meeting your negotiate, like in that case from Spain, and trying to be nice and attend a meeting with not like throwing something to them or something like this, and at the same time be critical and able to write. So I don't know. I mean, sometimes I had my discussions with my delegation, especially because in the end you know more than them, because you are totally involved in the negotiations and you have a lot of information coming on. And then I could use this power of knowing more to tell them, hey, you know that this is not like this is going to be like this, and they were super impressed. But this only happens when you are in a while in the negotiations. But when it comes to writing, I was always very critical. I was using the fact that in Spain there's all these crises with politicians, that no one trusts them because of cases of corruption. Example, the biggest example is that Arias Cañete, who is the climate commissioner in the European Union, has shares in oil companies and gas and promotes nuclear energy. So that's very incompatible with having a climate position. So I was putting all of this in my article, saying, okay, you are in this process as citizens of Spain of being really critical with your country, with your politicians. Please now put this into climate change as well. See that they are doing the same. They are at the same time they are destroying your economy. They are also destroying your climate, let's say. And I was pointing the crisis not as a bad thing for the environment, but as an opportunity to start to do something. I don't know if that responds to your question, because I was really hearing.
I kind of threw 4 questions at you in one, so
okay.
that was perfect. Thank you. Well, it's the top of the hour, and I'll hang out and try and get back to some of you guys on Twitter directly, and we'll also send a follow-up email, and you'll be able to interact with Chris and I directly. Just to summarize, we are running this Climate Tracker program from May all the way through the COP. So we will keep supporting you guys as writers from now until we go to Paris. Some of you in September will be offered a funded fellowship to join us in Paris. And we're going to make that decision largely based on your participation between now and September in the Climate Tracker program. And we're going to get started this month with our first global call for climate action, asking you guys to publish 1 piece. And we're going to follow up with a whole bunch of ideas for what might anchor that piece. We have so the information you provided us in the sign-up form. You told us where you're from. You told us what you're passionate about. You told us a little bit about your experience. So we may even be able to send some ideas and connections, even create webinar opportunities that are catered to your sign-up form, the information that you shared. So look out for that from Chris and I in the coming days. And over the course of this year, we may pick some specific themes in July or in September, or we may kind of keep it more regionally focused where you are. But this first call is pretty open. This is about you getting your voice out there. It's about, in some cases, you just sharpening your voice in the context of this massive year. for climate action and this massive transition. In other cases, it's going to be literally just about you learning how to pitch, trying, and maybe it's not going to work, and then you can try again. You know, talk to some people about what you're doing wrong or what you could do in addition, and you'll get there. So let's just do a quick round with last words from these guys. So Anna, are you gonna join us on this journey? Are you excited about it? Will we see you in Paris in some form?
I will definitely join you, especially writing, because I already have like a lot of ideas to write about INDCs and Spain, especially. I hope in Paris as well. I will find my way there, and I hope to meet all the new trackers there. So good luck, everyone. It's an amazing process, so go for it.
Excellent. And Lehi, what as an activist who's been to so many UN conferences, it's probably dizzying, and you know you've been on the ground a lot organizing. What are you most excited about this year? Oh, I think you're muted. No, we can't quite hear you. Do you speak sign language? Can you? Okay. We'll see if we can get. We'll circle back to you. Let's see, Antonio. Thanks for joining us from Bogota. Do you have any words for this amazing group of people who have signed up? We want to work with them, support them over this year. What can we do together?
Just the only thing I'd say, Josh, is that this initiative has been something that the GCCA has run since the beginning in 2009, and it has evolved substantially since then. And I think significantly, you know, that has been a result of efforts that Josh and Chris and all the trackers involved made last year, which showed the impact that this kind of an initiative had brought in. And so
Thanks, Antonio. It wasn't quite coming through on my screen. Hopefully it is for the rest of you, or this can be cleaned up in the archive. And Chris, what are your words for those who have joined? You'll be reaching out soon after, but do you have anything to share to sort of close this off?
Yeah, so it's been so great to catch up with all of you, and I would recommend for this first piece to really focus on the one thing that you want to see kind of change in your country, or with a government policy that's addressing climate change in your kind of local area, your kind of national government. Focus on one thing that you really want to see changed, and kind of make that the key focus of your first climate call for climate action piece. And if you have any questions, or if you want any support, whether it's about pitching, whether it's about ideas, whether it's about kind of anything that we've discussed in this call, feel free to reach out to us on Twitter. Feel free to reply to these blogs, and also obviously we're going to be sending you all out emails very, very soon, and we're going to be kind of hoping to hear from you. And please feel free to kind of respond to those emails with any questions you might have. And we're here to support you as much as possible. Like we said, this is both for kind of developing your skills as writers, and potentially picking a kind of a team leading towards Paris at the end of the year. But it's definitely about kind of giving you the skill set to transfer the way that climate change is talked about in your country. And we really want to get you to the position where you can be a real discussion leader and influencer in your country. So feel free to ask away as much as you can. We really want to support you as much as we can.
And Lehi, I think your mic's working. We can't hear you. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us. Thank you, Leahy. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Antonio. Thank you, Chris. As Antonio said, this is a project that we've been supporting since 2009, and it's grown and evolved, and we've learned a lot, and we've just seen some incredible things happen through the participants' efforts. So I think this year is going to be another unprecedented year of growth and evolution and learning and change, and we have so many talented people who have registered their interest. We hope to support all of you. Can't wait to work with you, and I'll be in touch soon over email. So thanks very much, and thank you guys. Good night, good morning, good afternoon. We'll talk again soon.